Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Carter. I'll be your moderator for today's mayoral candidate recording session. And it's on a short session because the candidates had a conflict for our regular time next Tuesday night, and so they agreed to come here, and we're recording it, and we have a special note of thanks to the Nordic Heritage Museum for hosting us, and Eric Nelson, the boss, and I've got Sheridan, Koehler, Alison, and Gordon Strand, who are the project group for the Nordic Heritage Museum Oral History Project. So thanks, a special note of thanks to the museum for sponsoring this, and thank you to all of you for turning out. This is pretty good for a recording session, I think. We want to thank our other sponsors who are kind of most of the community councils in the area: the Queen Anne Community Council, Magnolia, the Shell Shoal Liveaboard Association, the Ballard District Council, and the Coalition, which used to be the District Council, Magnolia, Queen Anne, and Interbay. Now, our program today will involve a preparation of a 30-minute segment for next week, and so we have the time set pretty short because next week, which we hope you'll also attend, we'll have a number of other candidates as well. The format, there will be a 2-minute opener for each candidate, followed by questions with 2-minute answers. We've received some questions from our boards and from the community. We've some of those to ask. If you have more questions you'd like to get in line, speak to Carol down here in front. She'll give you a card. You may or may not have your question answered today, but if you wish, we can give them to the candidates and perhaps they can respond in writing. So also, our timekeeper down in front, Don Apperly, has got a hook that may not be that sharp, but it is Ballard. And so, and he's the president of the Ballard gang. So, without further ado, we will have the openings, and the winner was Ms. Carrie Moon, and she elected to go second. So Jenny Durkin will give her 2-minute opener. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you very much, Bruce, and thank you everyone so much for coming. Thank you for the people who will be watching this later. It's great to be in this venue, and I'm excited for next year when the new space opens up. Ken Jacobson, when I walked in, he said I should feel pretty comfortable here because the Irish were just shipwrecked Nordics. You know, we in Seattle, I'm born and raised here, and I really love this city, but Seattle has changed so rapidly. We are seeing it change before our eyes and have incredible challenges. The homeless population continues to grow on our streets and in the RVs, and it's heartbreaking and changing the fabric of our city. It's also something that I think really is a measure of who we are, how we deal with that, and we must do better. Seattle is becoming unaffordable, as many of you know. People can't afford to live here, people can't afford to get here, and people who are in their homes now are not able to stay. I want to talk about later, hope we get a question on it, but one of the proposals we have is how to make sure people can stay in their homes by working on the property taxes. But we have a real opportunity to not just solve these problems, but to move Seattle to that place for the next generation. I have 2 sons, and more I see the world through their eyes. And I think that this election is really not about who's going to be mayor for 4 years, because mayors come and go. This is an election about what will Seattle be like for the next generation. Will we be that city that people still want to come to and move to and work in? Will we be diverse and have all sorts of housing in every neighborhood? Will we have conquered our transportation issues? We can build that city of the future, I am sure of it, because I've been in rooms like this with people like you, and people care. We still are the coolest city there is, with a generous people and a generous soul. I have every confidence we will get to that place and be honored to be your mayor. Thank you.
Carrie?
Thank you so much for doing this, and thanks so much for hosting us and for the great conversation we're going to have together. So, like Jenny, I love this city. I think we all love this city deeply. And I believe with all our potential, with our incredible wealth that we're generating, with our spirit of innovation, with our shared progressive values and our creativity, Seattle has so much potential to be the great progressive city of this country. But we are becoming a city of haves and have-nots, of winners and folks who feel like success is a party they were not even invited to. I believe with our city and our potential, we could be doing so much better. So I have laid out on my platform, on my website, a platform of solutions to all the crises that we all see around us. What to do about helping homeless people get back inside. What to do to stop the escalation of property values, build more affordable housing, and reclaim our housing market for local use for homes for people. How do we get ahead of police reform and continue to work towards restorative justice instead of incarceration? How do we invest in transit so that we're building transit as we grow instead of trying to catch up afterwards? I'm an urban planner, I'm an engineer, I'm a problem solver by nature, so I started my campaign with solutions because I think we all need to shift from recognizing we have deep problems in our city towards talking about how are we going to get there with real solutions. So I have 2 kids also, 2 teenagers and 2 stepkids in their 20s, and when I look at the world we're leaving them, I am angry and ashamed. I know we can do so much better, and I believe Seattle should be a beacon of hope, should be the city that reflects what progressive values can do in a local place that cares about the well-being of everyone, and I would love to lead that together with you as mayor of our beloved city. Thanks.
Thank you. Our questions are homegrown questions, and we like to think that they relate in particular to our neighborhoods and our particular concerns. And we provided the questions in advance to the candidates, and so they'd have a chance to think about our very local problems. The first one pertains to the Department of Neighborhoods. Our organizations have observed a shift in the city's Department of Neighborhoods that has accelerated in the past few years from a local bottom-up support of community-generated proposals and ideas to an opaque, minimal, centralized presence downtown. The district councils have been abolished, district coordinators are gone. We have noticed a remarkable disconnect between our neighborhood organizations and the city. Will you continue Mayor Murray's disconnect path, or will you plan to get the Department of Neighborhoods back out in the neighborhoods? Jenny, you're first on this one. We'll give each person the same question.
Again, thank you for having me here. I think neighborhoods are critical to who we are as a city. And you know, I've lived in almost every neighborhood in Seattle since I was born and raised here. My mom was born and raised on Queen Anne. And we've seen things change very rapidly. I think because of my background, I'm very much a grassroots type of person and community up. And one of the best parts about my campaign is I have been walking every neighborhood of the city, talking to people, sitting down with business owners. And I hear this over and over again, that somehow we have gravitated to having solutions come from City Hall. I don't think we can do that as a city. I don't think it works. I think that communities need to pull together and identify not just the issues they have in the community, but help us solve those problems. And that's, you know, I spend time with people in Rainier Beach, in Ballard, and Queen Anne, and the University District, West Seattle, and I hear the same thing over and again. So if I am mayor, I will tell you that we will have more inclusion by neighborhoods and by people. That doesn't mean there aren't tough choices and that, you know, on every issue, there's going to be a resolution that people love. That's part of being a big city and growing. But what it does mean is going from neighborhood to neighborhood. I took the upzone map from one neighborhood and I just walked it and saw, okay, I understand that if you upzone this block, why it's a big problem for the community. But if you went across the street, it might not be. On big issues and little issues, we need to listen to the people. I think that we've lost that too much, not just in the city, but in this country. And so I think as mayor, I will build more connectivity between the mayor's office and the communities. I think we need to activate formal bodies. They need to be very inclusive, but they also can use new formats. So I would look forward to working with people in this room, people in every room across the city, to continue to be building that city we want in the future that we'll love just as much as the city today.
Gary?
So this is a great question because I see exactly the same problem and it's frustrating for me. I first moved to Seattle, well, I lived here in the 80s, but I moved back in 97, and the first project I worked on was one of the neighborhood plans for Pioneer Square. And under Jim Deers, with the Department of Neighborhoods, the way it ran then, we had like the world's best neighborhood planning process because Planning groups were empowered, they were educated, they were funded, and they were given clear guidelines about here's what problems we're trying to achieve, here's the challenges we're facing together, how would you like to help your neighborhood grow towards this future vision that we all share. So the structure was laid out, the groups were empowered, and the communication channels between the city and the neighborhoods were established. That's constructive neighborhood planning, that's bottom-up grassroots planning at its best. Seattle invented that, but slowly we have drifted away from it. We need to bring that back. And as mayor, I will set up very clear decision-making structures in the mayor's office. I think this is another problem we've had that's causing this disconnect. Just so much of what goes on in the mayor's office is driven by politics and not by professional level management. So we need decision structures between departments and the mayor's office. We need collaboration channels between the mayor's office and council and regional players, regional partners. So we need to be a lot more professional in how we manage and operate the city and make decisions, because that's the way you can get towards transformative change without politics blocking progress that we need to make. And finally, I think we need to really think about how Department of Neighborhoods works. We have kind of fallen into some bad habits where they've become a buffer between the neighborhood and the city, but we need to establish better communication channels between the departments that are doing projects in the city, whether it's SDOT or whether it's planning and development or SPU. We need to establish DON as a convener and as a way for communities to get direct access and involvement with what's going on in their city, instead of feeling like they're cut off and have no way to communicate and access and share power.
Thank you. The next question, and Carrie, this one goes to you. We'll keep double ending. It pertains to the Magnolia Bridge, which I think, as you know, is falling down. The Department of Transportation predicts that the next major earthquake will result in the catastrophic failure of the Magnolia Bridge, Seattle's worst rated bridge. It presently serves essential transportation needs of the Magnolia Village, South Magnolia, T91 cruise facilities, the Elliott Bay Marina, Smith Cove Park, and the developing industrialization of the Terminal 91 uplands. If elected, are you committed to a combined effort with the port to resolve these traffic problems before the Magnolia Bridge falls down? They declared it a disaster after the last earthquake.
Right, and put some Band-Aids on it and called it good and walked away from it, right?
It's good for today, that's the word we get. Go ahead.
So this is, a symptom of a deeper problem. Like, we are not sufficiently funding the infrastructure that we need because we have the most regressive tax structure in the country, in our state. So I want to answer a slightly different question first and then come back to Magnolia Bridge, because I think we all see, we have crumbling infrastructure everywhere. We're not keeping up with our transit system. The Magnolia Bridge is a great poster child for this problem. We need to work with regional players and work with Olympia to shift our thinking about how do we pay for the infrastructure we all need to thrive, and focus on the constructive investment we need to make in our future, and shift the conversation around progressive taxation to that. What do we need to build the society we all want, to build the infrastructure businesses and communities need to thrive? And then let's have a conversation about what taxes we need to get there. Because we have to get away from the trickle-down economic thinking that has polluted the way we fund things in this state. As Scandinavians, I think you see what a great run society can be when you pay high taxes, you invest in public infrastructure, and everyone benefits. We need to get to that place in our state and in our city. So we need to talk about capital gains tax. We need to talk about a more steeply progressive B&O tax, so large corporations pay more than small local businesses. We need to talk about changing inheritance and estate taxes. We need to talk about estate income tax. Now is the time to have a conversation about a progressive tax system that funds all the things we need. So back to Magnolia Bridge, definitely yes, as mayor I will work with the port and all other regional players to figure out how we can both get the bridge replaced and deal with the traffic impacts that are happening now and will be much worse if the bridge does fail.
Penny?
I don't know how many decades we've had this discussion about the Magnolia Bridge, and it doesn't seem to get better. We have too much failing infrastructure, and as your mayor, I promise I will work with the port and others. On all the issues we're facing today, we have to have more regional cooperation, whether it's homelessness, affordability, transportation. Seattle can't fix it all alone. But we also have to get to a place where we just quit talking about what we're going to do and actually get some things done. And so I think that is not just the Magnolia Bridge, but all of our problems, I think, is going to require us to pull people together to really work on solutions that will work and get it done. That's what I've been doing my whole career here in Seattle on some of the biggest issues we face. It's what I'm good at and what I would like to do. If I'm lucky enough to be mayor, that day the work starts for everyone in this room, because all of this is going to require everyone to roll up their sleeves. The second thing I just want to talk on and use this as an opportunity is, this area is subject to earthquakes. It is very likely that in the near term we will have an emergency like that. And if you look at what's happening across this country, we haven't been prepared there and we're not prepared here. When I was U.S. Attorney, one of the most sobering things I did was tabletop exercises regularly with all the emergency preparedness people, talking about what happens if there's a terrorist strike, what happens if there's a major earthquake. And it will not just be the Magnolia Bridge that fails. And so all of us need to be thinking about, do we have a place to shelter in place? Do we have our supplies? Are we ready? This weekend marks September 11th. That's when I go to Costco to replace my emergency supplies. I'd urge all of you to be thinking about that too, because we always think it couldn't happen, but yet it does. So yes, I'll work on the Magnolia Bridge, but we all need to be thinking about how do we recover as a city. Thank you.
The next question pertains to the Sound Transit Tunnel to Ballard. And Sound Transit studied a light rail alignment from downtown to Ballard, particularly the area between the Magnolia Bridge and Ballard, though they think Magnolia is part of Ballard. And the local groups came up with a proposal for a tunnel to Ballard. And they said we should get the light rail off of 15th, run it over by Magnolia, run it under the Ship Canal to Ballard. The other option was to run it down 15th, which would take capacity off of 15th, and then have a drawbridge to Ballard, which would be interruptible and would be very bad for the schedule. Well, unfortunately, the drawbridge is cheaper. And so we consulted with our representatives, Sally Bagshaw and Jeannie Colwells, went to bat for us, but we're sort of on the cusp. We're still close. So what are your thoughts about our tunnel to Ballard?
This is one of the topics. I was lucky enough to tour Ballard twice in different walking tours, and I heard a lot about the tunnel and have thought about it. Part of the problem we have is infrastructure in general. I'm going to tie this to the Magnolia Bridge. Seattle grew so fast. I mean, we were a city built for the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we're now catching up in every way. Our infrastructure wasn't ready, our transportation and roads weren't ready, our social service infrastructure for the homeless wasn't ready. We now have the opportunity with Sound Transit 3 to be thinking about not just what will look like today, 4 years, 10 years from now, but what will it be for my kids? What will it be for your kids and grandkids? And so I think we have to really look at all these options. We have to look at expense and have cost effective. I will say we have to do it in a way that's regulated and smart, because Sound Transit, as it is already, Sound Transit 3 won't come online for so long. It won't be solving any of our problems for so long. Our best chance is to speed it up, but the siting is always the most difficult. That's when neighborhoods fight, people fight. So if I'm mayor, I want to start those discussions with Sound Transit 3 almost on day one. Set up an executive work group with Sound Transit 3 and the city working together to have a whiteboard in a room and be thinking about what do we need to get this moving now? Who do we talk to? What cost do we have available? Rather than do things 1 foot in front of the other like we usually do in permitting processes, we've got to do it collaboratively, we've got to do it at the same time, and it's got to start right away. Otherwise, these projects won't come in on time or on budget and won't do what we need them to do. So that will be my commitment as mayor.
So I'm with you that we need a tunnel to Ballard. And I've looked at the different designs. Drawbridge is fatally flawed for reliability, and a high bridge is fatally flawed because it just simply takes too much space off the street. So we have got to figure out how to make a tunnel happen. So I think the planning and design process that's going on right now, where they're preparing alternatives and studying them, we have to all keep a close eye on it and make sure that we are figuring out how to make the tunnel work, because I can't see either of the other two options working. And I would make sure to look at your proposal for a tunnel in a different location, because that sounds really promising. With Sound Transit 3, we have such a huge opportunity, and I want to make sure the city is doing its part to deliver as much as we can, as quickly as we can. So that means, like Jenny said, doing the right outreach early, because we need to have neighborhoods aware of what's going on, aware of the alternatives, and communicating and contributing to the discussion so that we can, once we get the right alternative identified, we can get it through quickly without lawsuits and without delay and further process. Second, we have to really look at using our bonding capacity to help speed up delivery of the project. Part of the project timeline being so long is due to the slow arrival of the money. So the more we can get money up front into the project, the more quickly we can build it out. The more quickly we can build it out, the more program or product we can build. So if we can build it more quickly, we have a much better chance of getting the Ballard to UW spur included in the project, which is really important, I think. And I think permitting, that's the other area where the city has a lot of control over how quickly this project gets delivered. And I think as mayor, I would really commit to getting the permitting done as quickly as possible so the city is not a bottleneck in causing delay to Sound Transit 3.
Thank you. Gary, you got the next one. Are we getting ahead or behind on our war or quest? We don't have wars anymore. Quest against widespread addiction, mental illness, and homelessness. What course do you recommend going forward?
Okay, can I just acknowledge this is heartbreaking for everyone, that the number of homeless people under the age of 30 is climbing really quickly. The number of LGBTQ youth who are homeless is climbing really quickly. This is a problem that's getting worse, not better, and we need to do a lot more to get ahead of it. I think the Pathways Home process that the city's been going through to take a really deep look at how do we get ahead of this. How do we invest in long-term supportive housing, which is the right long-term goal for the people who are chronically going to need help? How do we get more emergency shelter now, because the people living on the streets will come inside if we offer them a place to come inside? How do we get more funding into into addiction and mental health and behavioral health services, because that's another key part of this that's causing homelessness? And primarily, how do we get more affordable housing built? Because even if you get back on your feet, even if you've been through an emergency shelter or transitional housing, you get back on your feet, $15 an hour minimum wage is simply not enough to afford housing in our city. So the housing affordability crisis and the homelessness crisis are intertwined, and we have to look at them both together, and we have to solve them both together. And to me, that means we need a lot more focus on nonprofit and public affordable housing development. Let's use some of the surplus public land that is in our city that's lying unused. How can we get that back into use for housing built by either the public sector, SHA, or by our nonprofit partners who do such a great job building affordable housing in our city? So how do we get 4 times the amount of affordable housing production going in the pipeline as soon as possible while we're tackling these other challenges of homelessness? Because the problem is getting worse, not better. We are pushing more people into homelessness faster than we're helping them out, and we've got to get ahead of this by tackling this at the root, not putting Band-Aids on symptoms.
I think the question was directed at the addiction and opiate crisis, but is so linked to homelessness in general. You have to look at both. And it is getting worse. We all know it's getting worse. For people who will be watching this later, from Queen Anne, Ballard, Magnolia, it's not just the homeless living on the streets, but the people living in RVs and cars is continuing to increase. And we as a city, we have to do better. The good news is we can do better. I think we have to first understand that the people living on the street are not just a monolithic population. People get to the street for different reasons, and we can't have a one-size-fits-all solution. You know, for example, Seattle has one of the highest populations of moms with kids living in cars. That's just wrong. And I think we have to have a different strategy for those moms and kids than we do for the heroin addict who's living in a tent under the freeway, because they may have different problems. So the first thing we have to do is design our strategies to meet the populations who are living there. The second is we really have to be more realistic and have better things for addiction treatment. Yesterday I was doing a walking tour in Georgetown, and it was remarkable because I'm walking down the street and I hear this, Jenny Durkin, and I turn, and this is when you know that you're starting to be known, and a man walks up to me and he says, I'm homeless, and if I'm mayor, there's things I think you need to know and do. And then we had a conversation. Here's a man who struggled with mental health illness, some addiction problems, and the only way he felt he could get housing was to try to commit suicide so they would take him to the emergency room. We have to do better than that, and if we don't have more addiction services and mental health treatment for the people on the streets, we will not improve the homeless conditions. And so I think there's a variety of things we can do to do that. I look forward to talking to you about those individually, and we've talked about some on our website, and we'll be talking some more about that. My time's up though, thank you.
Okay, one more question. In what ways will the policies of your administration differ from those of Mayor Ed Murray, particularly in light of the Amazon news?
So let me tell you what a Durkin administration would be like, and some of it will be very different. The first thing will be, it will be grassroots up, community up. You know, the best part I have found, the most valuable thing for me for running for mayor has been getting out in the neighborhoods, getting into the rooms like this, big rooms, small rooms, and just listening to people about what's happening in their communities, in their cities. What are they seeing? What are they feeling? What do they want as solutions? And so I will revitalize the Department of Neighborhoods. You can't have a Department of Neighborhoods from City Hall. It is not the Department of City Hall. And so we need to revitalize that connection. We need to make sure it's inclusive, because Seattle has changed very rapidly, and there are parts of our town that have really been left behind. The south part of Seattle is struggling more than anyone else, and we need to make sure that we are empowering the youth there and letting them know that we care about them and we will provide opportunities. You know, I will also be different because I will have a very strong working relationship regionally with the county executive, with mayors up and down the corridor, the state legislature, and our federal partners, because none of these problems are ones we can handle alone. I also will have great relationship with the Seattle Public Schools. Our schools are our future. We need to have that relationship. It is why I rolled out as one of my concrete proposals that every person, every kid who graduates from a Seattle public school will get 2 years free tuition in community college of their choice. That will open up opportunities for them. It will increase graduation rates. We're also, we released yesterday, we will increase apprenticeship programs so those kids who want to go into the trades can get connected with those jobs. We want the jobs for Seattle to be grown in Seattle. And I think with Amazon or any other company, they will see that we can be the best city that has tackled affordability, that is making sure that our kids will be filling those jobs. Thank you.
Harry?
There's so much to say here. I'm trying to figure out how to pack it all in. So first, regarding Amazon, I think there's a clear distinction between my administration and Murray's administration in terms of who gets access, who gets listened to, whose needs get met, whose voices get heard at City Hall. Because I think we have grown from a city that cared about neighborhoods, that cared about the well-being of all people, that had really clear communication channels, into a city where a fairly small insular group of wealthy white people, I'll just say it, have access to City Hall and have the ear of the mayor and guide things in a direction that makes sense to them. They think they're doing the right thing, but it is not inclusive enough of lower income folks, of folks from communities of color, of folks who are struggling and feeling left behind, of folks who are out in the neighborhoods that really don't need to come downtown very often and wonder why all the resources and all the investment goes downtown instead of more broadly across the city. So that's my big difference between me and Ed Murray regarding Amazon. But more generally, I'm an engineer, I'm a systems person, so I will establish much more clear management structures, communication channels, decision-making structures within the city, because I think we have a problem now where so many things get driven by politics and not by professional leadership. Second, I will empower department managers to do their jobs. I will let them do their jobs, and I will hold them accountable to do their jobs, because we all know, 99% of the city's business gets done in the departments by the managers, but we need to hold them accountable and make sure they have what they need to do excellent work. And third, I think in times of flux and transformation like this, what we're missing most is a vision. We need to understand what future city we're aiming for and have a clear action agenda for how we're going to get there that we can all look at and say, yes, I see where my city's going. I see I will belong there and feel welcome there. I want to be part of that future city. I want to help make good things happen. Because without that, we're all feeling insecure and worried and wondering, will I be able to live here? Will my kids be able to live here? We need to get past that. So I'll stop.
Time for closings, 1 minute. I think maybe I've heard of, but Carrie, you have 1 minute.
So, I came from activism, from advocacy, from working in the nonprofit sector, from working in neighborhoods and in community. And I have worked with most of the departments in the city in some capacity or another. I have a lot of expertise in planning, in thinking about transportation systems, in looking at housing affordability solutions, in thinking about the question of how do we make sure we build an economy that's building prosperity for everybody, not just creating wealth for the wealthy folks, but really building jobs and building stability and economic security and community. And I have spent so much time developing solutions and advocating from the outside and watching in frustration our city not do the right thing. So I decided it was time to step up and bring real solutions and real progressive leadership and a commitment to a collaborative city that we all can contribute to the future of, to this race and to my candidacy for mayor. And I would be really honored to have your vote and really look forward to working with you in the next 4 years.
This election really is about what city we want in the future and what Seattle will we leave for the next generation. It's also about how Seattle can show the country and lead on issues we care about. It is very clear to me that we will not be getting leadership from Washington, D.C. on the issues we care about, whether it's climate change, immigration, transportation, basic civil rights. And so Seattle will have to lead. Before you can lead as mayor on big issues, you also have to make sure you take care of the small issues. So as mayor, I will focus on potholes, making sure that the lights come on, the fire service comes up, the police. But we can do that, and we can do so much more. I believe we have what it takes to tackle affordability and make sure that we can be an inclusive, welcoming city where people can afford to live. I believe we can get our transportation right. And I believe that we can be that city in the future that not just Amazon's bring, but we're the city that, remember, we invent the future. Nordstrom's, Costco, Starbucks, all these great cities came from right here, all those great companies. I think that's the future for us, but it's got to be inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, and we're exactly on time.
How about that?
I never imagined. We're off the tape now because we have 30 minutes there, but if you have questions.
You have that one question I gave you.
Okay, I have one question. All right. It was pretty.
We can take a couple questions. Let's do it.
All right. Well, it was on topic to some extent. Ballard has had a major growth and numerous homeless services added. I quit too. Okay, Ballard has had major growth and numerous homeless services added, all well needed. However, we've also had significant increase in urban disorder and crime, with no holistic oversight or impact mitigation. How would you lead neighborhoods to be safer and be more effective at helping people? I think the how would neighborhoods become safer is probably the really additional ingredient.
So one of the things you do when you're a candidate for mayor is you get to go on a ride-along with the cops and really understand from their perspective what is working and what's not working. And I learned a lot. And one of the things I learned is that because of staffing issues and because of paperwork issues and protocol issues, the police force spends less and less time proactively in the community, meeting folks, understanding hotspots, understanding problems before they erupt. and more time helping people in crisis and on 911 calls. And so we've got to get that equation back in the right balance of cops being on the street, working with communities, helping prevent problems before they happen, and helping deal with folks in crisis who are suffering and need help. And we see them on the sidewalk, whether they're addicts having a meltdown or whether they're folks in crisis with mental health problems. And we just simply have not invested enough in the services to help them. So we need a lot more social work and outreach services in neighborhoods, working with cops or working independently of cops, but we need a lot more folks out in neighborhoods helping people where they are get back on track. And we need to get the police force staffing right so that they're spending more time in community, building relationships and solving problems before they erupt. But it's also about resources, as I talked about before. We simply need more resources so that we have a place to invite people who are in crisis, in addiction, who need help. We have services ready to go, facilities ready to help them, and we simply have a problem with that. So the cops, we have a program called LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, that we have downtown that works really well for the cops to get people who are in crisis into treatment, but we need to expand that out into the neighborhoods and scale it up so it has adequate resources.
I've been working on public safety issues for over 30 years in Seattle, and I don't think there's any area where the importance of collaboration between communities and city is more important. And we have seen a real decline in neighborhoods of late, and you hear that everywhere we go. And I think there's a number of things that we can do to improve it. Number one is we have to, the question was asked about homelessness, but it's bigger than that. It goes again back to the opiate problem. Our property crime rate has increased significantly in every neighborhood from downtown across the city. That is tied inextricably with the opiate problem. You have addicts who break into cars, into homes to steal something. So that again goes back to we have to deal with the people who have addiction problems, and we have to deal with from a health point of view. Right now we have only one methadone clinic in the whole city. If an addict who's living on the streets can be convinced to get out of the tent and into treatment, it can be a waiting list of 6 weeks. Well, that addicts won't wait for 6 weeks, so we need more services there. We also need to reinstate community policing in a real way. People need to know their beat cop. Hate to go back to Georgetown, but yesterday I met the police officer who really is the beat cop. He knows every camper in every RV. He knows every business person. He knows when people need to be moved along, when they can stay, when they're in crisis. So we have to really have a community policing model. We also need better songs on cell phones, because those really drive you crazy, don't they? But yeah, that's about safety. We also need something, and I've been working with people to figure out how do we get something other than 911 when there's a crisis. When someone's in crisis, it shouldn't be people with guns that show up necessarily. So we need to go back to a system where we can have a number we call where someone other than police respond to a crisis situation. And we need a situation where we can get burglaries and those responded to in the same month? No, in the same day.
Good. We have a standing question here. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jalaire Blackson with Speak Out Seattle. I've been working on the issue of drug consumption sites, which are also known here in this region as safe injection sites. Following some of the King County Council meetings of late, and I was a signator on